I didn't see it coming either, but I wasn't looking for Ukraine going into Russia. But the nice thing about it was that the Russians that they encountered, a lot of them just surrendered rather than try to stick it out and fight to the death.
They're probably so drunk. I mean, like, why not?
Yeah.
Honestly, if you're a Russian up there and you haven't done any like heinous war crimes, you want to fucking surrender. Like, you got the Russians shooting at you from behind, you got the Ukrainians shooting at you from the front. Just surrender to the Ukrainians. Hopefully, they don't kill you, and just like take your chances. Hi, everybody. This is John Koenig back from Real Veteran News, here with three of my good veteran friends to talk about the veteran news that matters to veterans, I guess, for this week. So I will say before we start that my knee is a little messed up. So you might see me like gangster leaning or whatever, but I'm just trying to I was thinking about sitting down, but I like talking shit standing up. So let's get on with introducing you guys. Everybody's been on before, so nobody new. Let's go with Jesse. You want to go first?
Yeah. Hey, good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm Army guy, currently reservist, been in over 22 years, did traditional stuff, combat engineer, blowing things up, logistics, stuff like that.
Chuck Seal, also Army guy, not currently in, but was in Iraq a couple of times, spent a while at the State Department, and my background is mostly cyber, and it's good to be here.
Great. Thanks for coming back. Mason.
Hey guys, I'm the Air Force nerd here, and I just like technology and general military technology and warfare and like the study of World War III. That's kind of my jam.
Awesome. I don't like talking about myself, so that's it. Oh yeah, so Chuck's back this week. I asked Chuck to come back again because I'm trying to have one liberal, and I'm building up my liberal talent here. So Chuck filled in a second week here. I'm trying to get another person on, and so hopefully Nikki next week.
I don't understand what the problem is because there's a lot of liberal talent out here, John.
Yeah, but the military veteran, and it's like I have to know them, and they have to be willing to go on and talk to us and stuff. So it's you're a unique, or you're a special precious little Chuck. The topics this week are Iran counterattack, Ukraine update, basically. Walz, Vance, which are the two vice presidents, obviously. Niger Withdrawal. The U.S. military just pulled out of Niger. Everybody's thinking that Iran is going to counterattack Israel somehow. Now they're saying that they might have decided to chill out a little bit. They're mad because of the bomb in the guest house in Tehran last week that killed Ismail Haniyeh. And Hezbollah is mad because they killed Tupac Shakur in Beirut. So come on. No one got that? You're kidding me. All right. That's my best material. Fuck. All right. They're saying they're waiting for an imminent response, and they're thinking about how to retaliate without an escalation cycle. The things that we're interested in is Iran rational or irrational? And apparently Netanyahu's approval is at 32% right now. And so, all right. Who would like to go first?
I would jump in just because based on what you just said, is Iran rational may not be the question we should be asking, right? If Netanyahu's approval is at 30-some%, is he acting rationally or, rationally in the scope of what the decisions he's making stuff about, right? He may be much more concerned with his political stability at home, not paying any price for allowing this attack to happen in Israel, and that might incentivize him to take actions that are otherwise irrational on the international stage, right?
Okay. Let me just put it on. My joke was I said Tupac Shakur. His name is Fuad Shakur. But fuck that guy anyway. So who's next?
It's John, great joke. I'm actually going to prepare for an open mic later, in case you're curious. Hopefully mine will be better than that. I don't understand. This is just the same old saber-rattling bullshit from Iran, in my opinion. They launched rockets at Israel, 200 rockets only a couple of weeks ago. So, I mean, what are they going to do now? They probably have a depleted arsenal. Maybe they've reloaded a little bit, but you guys already gave it your best shot.
They got a ton of missiles. And they got those EMP weapons now.
I'm just saying, I think they already gave Israel their best shot, and now they're just talking because that's all they can do.
You don't think they have any dry powder? You serious?
I exactly what I said. I think they can still do that exact same salvo again. but maybe even a little bit bigger. But I think that Israel will be just fine. Actually, one other final thought. What about there was an airstrike and 5 U.S. service members, I think, were injured in Iraq? I think that was part of the retaliation. So I feel like the United States needs to retaliate for that. And I haven't seen any measures or any news articles about a U.S. retaliation schwacking some Iranians for that. And that needs to happen.
I think they did. They did a preemptive strike in Iraq. I think I saw that.
Yeah, there was a strike in Iraq, and I also think the last thing that is in our interest is to get dragged into this any more than we already are.
Bingo, Jesse. What do you think?
Yeah, and I'm surprised that Iran has yet to do anything. And then some of the headlines are saying, hey, they just may not do anything at all. I don't think it's because they don't have any rockets. I think it's because they're really trying to calculate what they want to do. But I figured they would have retaliated swiftly because that's their own home turf, which is really provocative to them.
The Israelis are in the middle of a blood rage right now, so you have to they're probably what exactly should we do?
And yeah, they had a huge problem there. But remember, this happened this is not like a blood rage. Somebody didn't just do this yesterday, right? We are well out. They've had plenty of time to take action, to do planning. And I feel like we're not in blood rage stage right now, right? They should be acting in an effective and calculated way to bring this to a close in an effective way for their own interests, which I'm not sure that's what they're doing right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just think that they would have responded really quickly, but they didn't. And that's okay. But I still would have thought, hey, it's been 2 weeks now, almost. So are they going to do anything is the question at hand, I think.
I think they've already done it. I think they've already done everything they can do, and they're continuing to do all they can do because they've been at war. And just because Israel doesn't strike all the way back very often. So I think Iran is doing the best they can, and they're showing how bad they are at projecting force.
All right. Part of my analysis here is that I think that they are having a reaction of being embarrassed about the guest house thing. It killed the guy and his bodyguard. It killed no innocent people. They didn't shoot a rocket in the country. They snuck the bomb in. It's just super fucking embarrassing. So oh, we must get revenge, but it's really it's not like they killed all these innocent Iranians or anything. I mean, USS Abraham Lincoln group is going. I don't know if they're in the Mediterranean or where they're coming from, but they're going to defend Israel. I guess Mediterranean. Well, it could be either. And then there's also a fighter squadron going. Something that I would ask is we're moving our forces there because obviously it could escalate, right? If Iran does something or if Israel does something else, it's like a Mexican standoff. And then we're slapping our dick down on the table out there,
That's what the Navy does. That's what I love about this is there's this call to complete instability in the region, and the Navy just goes full big dick and is as you put it, slapping their dick on the table and just answering that call. And the Navy does that really well. Every time that there's hostility, they'll just here's a carrier group. What would you like to do now? You got to love the Navy for that because they're basically preventing World War III one carrier group at a time.
Could you imagine if a pilot got downed in Beirut or one of these places, and they caught him or something? It's just...
They would beat that guy to death very quickly.
No, I think they'd take him and make a big propaganda thing. They'd fuck him up.
All right, so the United States Air Force Academy, we have one Medal of Honor recipient in our history, and it's Major Lance P. Saijan, who was beaten to death.
Probably better than being tortured to death, for a super long time or something. Come on.
He didn't enjoy it for a month, don't get me wrong. He had a rough go. I'm just saying, that would be the fate of that individual.
But hopefully that's not in the cards, right? Hopefully what we did was come in and it's dad standing in the room as opposed to, starting more trouble.
I don't know. If we're flying missions side by side with them, if we're doing predator, reconnaissance stuff, we're collecting intelligence over the area, I think it's whatever. But if we're dropping bombs side by side, they're already dropping our bombs. Or if we're our people are out there, unless it's some kind of special operation thing where there's some American hostages or something, but we shouldn't be sending in we did the Marines into Lebanon back in the 80s or anything like that. Because it's super religious. It's ridiculous. These 2 desert religions, and these people are just at each other. it's not even really like a strategically important part of the world. Like, there's not really any natural resources or anything. It's just this like religious, historical. It's a nice place. I mean, I would say it's a nice place, but it's just like this Holy Land shit. We gotta like just stamp this out. It's like a forest fire, and you just gotta like put it out.
Regardless of whether they have any strategic assets right there, it is tied to an area that is packed with strategic assets, right? We're very worried about the global oil supply, and it is sitting just next to and involves the all those parties.
Yeah, it's adjacent.
The conflict involves all those parties.
Syria, Israel, that Sinai, like that whole the Levant area, like there's nothing there. I mean, it's just a nice place. I mean, but it's not like the Persian Gulf or something where all the oil is, or like the Malacca Straits, where all the Asian shipping, or the Straits of Hormuz. It's not like this like choke point or this pivot point or whatever. It's just people want to live there because these religions that happened a long time ago.
It is incredibly close to that stuff, and all the parties who control those places are involved in this conflict. So that's
everybody wants it to end, though.
Mostly.
Mason pointed this out in our group, but Ukraine did this counterattack that apparently they didn't tell the U.S. about or something. Probably because we would have tried to convince them not to do it. They achieved operational surprise. About 1,000 troops, 11 tanks, and more armored vehicles, like armored personnel carriers and stuff. They busted through the Russian lines near Kursk Oblast. As of yesterday or whatever, they were like 20. Some of them were like 20 kilometers in, 10 kilometers. They had recon elements that were up to 20 kilometers into Russian territory. The Russians are evacuating civilians out of there, and they're basically like internally displaced Russian refugees. Not a huge amount, but I mean some. The Russian response was like, first they said it wasn't that big a deal, it's under control. Then they said it was what did they say? Large-scale provocation, and then they declared a federal emergency, probably to like unlock funds or however they do it over there. They did say the situation is under control. They're trying to project that it's under control, but this has spooked the Russian public. It was a great PR coup, and the Ukrainians did it to show that the war is not frozen. So what did you think about this counterattack and just like the idea of them counterattacking it?
If I understand my map, I haven't looked at a map, honestly, so I'm saying this, please correct me if I'm wrong. Most of the fighting's been in the southeastern region of Ukraine, and the Kursk would be the northwest region of Ukraine if they were going to attack from in that area, or at least northern. So they created a new opening. They created a new front in the battle, and we'll see how long they're able to exploit that. But it's a brilliant attack. I didn't see it coming.
I didn't see it coming either, but I wasn't looking for Ukraine going into Russia. But the nice thing about it was that the Russians that they encountered, a lot of them just surrendered rather than try to stick it out and fight to the death.
They're probably so drunk. I mean, like, why not?
Yeah.
Honestly, if you're a Russian up there and you haven't done any like heinous war crimes, you want to fucking surrender. Like, you got the Russians shooting at you from behind, you got the Ukrainians shooting at you from the front. Just surrender to the Ukrainians. Hopefully they don't kill you, and just like take your chances.
It was a well-played move, though. We'll see how it impacts things operationally and strategically, but yeah, tactically, it was a great move.
I guess I agree. I think it was a smart move. Unexpected by literally everybody. Unexpected by us. I'm not sure that they're telling us everything, but I don't know that they need to tell us everything. And it sort of changed the tone. I think there was a whole lot of talk about whether they can hold out, where this is going, if folks should continue supporting them, and I think all of a sudden they've turned the tables to some extent by showing they can take actions that put the Russians on their back foot, which is exactly what they need to do, right?
One thing I think is really interesting here is like our generals didn't know about it. It's like not their idea. Like, this is obviously successful, right? They said it's a great PR coup. This didn't come from our generals. This came from some crafty Ukrainian guys or gals or whatever's over there. You know what I mean? Like, when we gave them the plan in 2023 or 2022 or whatever, or 2023, and they tried to push through the Russians in the southeast and they just got chewed to pieces. That was our general's plan that we forced on them. They wanted to do stuff like this. They wanted to just play defense and like look for like weak spots in the Russian line and be flexible, and then mass forces at these points, whatever, but basically play defense. And the American generals did war game after war game after war game and said that they could, if they put all their armor in one place, they could bust through and try to cut off the Crimea Peninsula, which would that'd be great, obviously. But obviously the Russians had like miles and miles and miles of defenses and the UAVs and everything, and it's like did not work. This incursion is like a psychological attack because you can't take over Russia with 1,000 men. Probably some women in there too, but like you can't 1,000 people. You can't take over much anything. You're just basically, it's like a Doolittle raid, psychological, hit the enemy at home type mission.
I mean, it seems like it had an impact in exactly that way. And it also seems like Russia is struggling a little bit at home, right? With getting people to volunteer for the military. Like there are issues there. And this is probably just one more thing that drives home that maybe this isn't the smartest thing. I don't know. It could go either way, right? I say this is one more thing that drives home the fact that this war on their border doesn't make sense, but maybe it also incites Russians and engenders more support. I think it's tough for me. I'm not a Russia expert, so it's tough for me to to speak to exactly how it's going to motivate the population and what it's going to do.
I mean, John, I like the hating on the generals. Did it well.
I'm going to take the chance to shit on them anytime I can. All right. Just in general on the Ukraine strategy, I think they should have been on defense the whole time. Stuff like this is okay. I mean, if it's like a clear win, like it's an easy one, like a layup or whatever, okay, hit them. But it should have been on defense. Like when you hear Ukraine, it should be the brand and what's popping up in your the mind association in everybody's head should be defense. Like the Ukrainians are playing defense. And when you hear Ukraine, defense, no offense, all defense. Like one of those football teams that wins the Super Bowl by kicking field goals. You know what I mean? And then this is like field goal. They're just kicking a field goal. I mean, they're not going to get in the end zone, but they can kick a field goal every once in a while. All right.
Ted offensive maybe would be a good analogy.
Well, that's like an insurgency.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, isn't some of that framing, right? Like, yes, defense, of course. That I actually agree with you that they should probably be viewed as defending their homeland. At a certain point, isn't maybe making an incursion, like doing a little bit of offense, maybe their best defense in this case. If it has the impact in Russia with Russian popular opinion, it could actually potentially affect the way that Russia operates. So sometimes offense is defense in that way.
If you only play defense, then they're going to take that for granted and start taking liberties. You got to do a little bit of offense to keep them honest. You know what I'm saying? And you get stuff like that. Like I said, this is a field goal. This isn't 7 points. It's 3 points. I mean, it has a big effect or whatever, and it's keeping them honest. And then this helps in the other regions because the Russians have to be more careful with their defense because they're all off. They were going all offense. I'm going to switch to the topic of Russian conscription, right? Because this is like a manpower thing at this point because the Ukrainians are running out of people to fight, and the Russians are also struggling, but they obviously have way more people. But because the Ukrainians are on defense, to pin the tail on my defense strategy here is that the Russians on offense are losing 3-1, and some people would say 6-1. So for every Ukrainian killed, they're losing 6 Russians. At that rate, if they had been playing good defense since the beginning of the war and had preserved their young manpower, they could have waited longer until the political and economic pressure had mounted on Putin and the other side collapsed. Basically, hold the ball or just not really playing with them. But, they plowed into them with everything they had for no good reason. They're saying that Russia has lost 586,000 soldiers as of a couple days ago. They lost 70,000 soldiers in the last 2 months with an average daily loss of 1,200 in May and 1,100 in June, which I think is just insane. I mean, even in the Iraq war, we have a bad week and we lose 5, 7, or 10 or whatever, or 20 or something. This is 1,000, 1,100, 1,200 people a day for months on end. I mean, this is a meat grinder out there. The flow of recruits is down 10% from 3 months ago. And bonuses are up to $23,000, which is comparable to the U.S. military's bonuses. I mean, $23,000 is a ton of money in Russia. So there's obviously pressure building on Russia too, and then this looming election.
I mean, at some point, there's going to be an economic impact of just they're not going to have enough dudes to do jobs.
Are you talking about Russia or Ukraine? What are you talking about?
Both, but I mean, domestically, they're not. It'll be felt in Russia because they're not getting the support of the United States, but that's some crazy numbers, like you just said. Those are some World War I level casualty rates.
Yeah. It's a whole generation lost, basically, of men, mostly.
I hadn't looked into the numbers of the casualty rates, but hearing them, that's astonishing. I did not realize it was that many lost per day. That is going to be unattainable.
these are crazy numbers. And if you want to be very cold about it, right, completely cold and calculating, is this a good investment on the part of the U.S.? It certainly sounds like it, right? We have.
Why are they our adversary again?
Why is Russia an adversary?
Russia?
I'm just saying. I think we should make friends with them.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, but like Putin's not going to be friends with us, obviously. You know.
No, I mean, if you think Putin wants to be our friend and somebody we can deal with on a positive basis, then I mean, I guess have at it, but not on my watch, not with the United States' resources. I think Putin is not in this for the advancement of U.S. interests, and never will be, and never will be aligned with us. I think Russia and Putin specifically sees the United States as a long-term adversary. And that anything that hurts the U.S. is an advantage to Russia, as opposed to being a partner that we might be able to deal with on equal terms. Which is, I think, the way that, if we head back a couple of decades, I think that's the way the U.S. maybe unfortunately was viewing Russia, and I don't think that Putin ever viewed us in that way.
I agree with you. I just think that we can maybe change that, because there's no reason for us to be against them, and the reason why they're against us is because we were against them. It's like largely based on ideological communist and capitalist basis, which is fairly silly. Again, maybe we hold them accountable with economic sanctions, but there's no reason for us to be funding wars anymore. I think the United States needs to get out of that business.
I guess I could agree with you that we shouldn't be in that place with them, but I don't think that's changing, and I don't think it's because of the United States that it's not changing. And so we have to live in the reality that exists, right? The world is what it is, and we need to operate in it, and I think we need to do it clear-headedly. If Russia is not going to move from that position, I think we need to operate as if they are in that position as they are. Right?
So Chuck is saying that the Ukraine money spent was a good investment for us. Mason is saying we shouldn't be spending money on foreign wars and stuff like that. I think there's probably a little bit of both, but you have the investment, but one of the negative byproducts of this conflict is that when Putin got desperate, he was forced to explore all options and pursue all avenues in order to salvage the situation in Ukraine, the Ukraine military operation they got. And so he was forced to go to China. He was forced to go to North Korea and Iran to get drones, to get artillery shell, whatever. Now they're all buddies. Now they've been shaking hands. I know they were kind of aligned before, but it's created this essentially de facto anti-American alliance between Russia, China, North Korea, and Iran. And so if we end up attacking any one of them or getting into fisticuffs with any of them, the other ones, it's not official, but they're just going to start amping things up all over the world. And the U.S. military is not going to be able to handle it. If you put all those militaries together and they all hit all at the same time and do what they want to do, grabbing land or bombing this or killing, or whatever, and, that's out of control.
Then we would use strategic engagement to destroy their attack. Yes, they would make gains if they all coordinated a massive attack.
They don't even have to. They can just watch the news and be like, let's fuck the Americans over now. They're busy.
Well, but then at the same time, John, where's that right now, right? I guess you're saying that they're providing some support and some weapons and some assistance. Where is this entire global destabilization that you're saying would happen if we? Do you think Russia and China are going to do global destabilization on behalf of North Korea and not on behalf of Russia? I don't know that I buy that.
It's if we commit against any one of them, the other ones are going to be going buck wild. You know what I mean? Russia
and China are going full bore on behalf of North Korea. I don't know that I just don't know that I buy that. Maybe you might be right. I don't think so.
I think the Ukraine thing forced them all together. They all realized that they're all outsiders, and so they started this outsiders club. And they've got channels, and it's unofficial. But this exists now.
It's pretty unofficial. I feel like if they were really serious about their support for each other, then it would be a lot more than unofficial.
I think they just keep it. They're shady. They're shady. They're doing it in the shadows. I don't see why they have to come out and do some big treaty on TV and everything.
Our support for Ukraine is extremely official, right? It's very visible. It's very vocal. It's very official.
I know, but it's united our enemies.
if they wanted to be in the same position, if they wanted to have the same kind of resistance, they could. I think the rest of the Western society has definitely, supported Ukraine in a very organized and official way.
It gave Putin the reason to go talk to these people, do business with them, more business. And it's an easy argument. He just goes up to them and he's like, it's me today, it's you tomorrow, so you better fucking help me. And they did, and they are.
But they haven't been incredibly supportive. They haven't been vocally supportive. I think, I see your point. I see that it's a possibility. It doesn't seem to me that there's a lot of evidence that supports that we have this, for lack of a way to put it, better way to put it, axis of evil, right? Like that we have these three nations now who are aligned fully against us and in cahoots and willing to support each other in any way possible. I'm not seeing it.
Iran, North Korea, China,
and
Russia.
Sure. Yeah.
All right.
I think we're making enemies. I know you asked Jesse, but I think we're just making enemies we don't need to make.
We're making enemies of Russia and North Korea, yeah? We're making new enemies in Russia and North Korea.
Well, we're definitely making new enemies across the Middle East with the blindly supporting Israel, everything they're doing. That's for sure. Let's move on to the politics, American politics, political campaign. I want to start with Tim Walz, Kamala Harris's new vice president pick. Everybody probably who's nerdy enough to watch the show knows who he is, this Minnesota governor guy or whatever. I want to talk about his military thing because it's all wishy-washy and how they reported it and everything. But I looked it up, and from what I saw, he spent 24 years in the Army National Guard doing various jobs, enlisted, kind of like artillery, National Guard, stuff like that. He retired in 2005, and he was essentially a master sergeant that was about to be, he got command sergeant major, but because he didn't go on the deployment and he basically retired from the military, they took it away essentially, or didn't take it away, but for his benefits, he's not an E9. He was like an E8 for his benefits or something. But, he could have been a command sergeant major if he wanted. Originally I was like, is this guy like a bitch? Like, did he not go to Iraq because he was, whatever? But he's a command sergeant major. He's artillery. He's probably not going to get killed or anything like that. It was like, obviously would have been his first Iraq deployment. He was already running for Congress. He's anti-war. Like, he was basically protesting the war. So the idea that he's gonna, just ship right off to Iraq, like when he can retire, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. It sucks that he basically deserted on the young men and I guess some women too that couldn't retire and had to deploy to Iraq. Some of whom probably didn't come back. But he was against the war. He was an anti-war man. I'm not going to say he's like a coward. He definitely didn't do his deployment. I can say that. But
shockingly good defense of him. I have to say I'm shockingly impressed with that statement that you are giving him some defense.
He's definitely personable. He's got that I wish I had someone like that in my high school. Honestly. But he's a good high school teacher, I guess, like that. Whatever. Chuck, you're the designated liberal, so let's hear what you have to say before they start shitting.
Yeah, I guess at least this time I'll sound like the liberal. I think he has dad vibes. I think in general, people seem excited about him. And I think some of these lines of argument are crazy. I think, was that a good defense of him? I'm not sure I would characterize it in that way. I think it's like totally reasonable. This is a guy who served 24 years from the age of 17 in the reserves and decided to retire. He decided to retire 4 years after September 11th, right? So this is not like he, retired as soon as September 11th happened. He put in paperwork. Who knows if I think no one knows if there was.
He was running for Congress.
He was running for Congress. I don't know if there was an indication or not that they were going to be deployed before he put in his paperwork, because that doesn't happen overnight. Like, you don't say I'm going to retire and you're gone 2 months later, right? So whether or not he put it in beforehand is in question. That's fine. I think that he was running for Congress. He certainly didn't want to put that in jeopardy. And I think that's a totally fair position to take after 24 years in the military. He didn't desert. He didn't run away. He didn't go AWOL. He served until he was a command sergeant major, and he retired from the reserves. I don't find any dishonor in that. And I personally think it's crazy that you've got other veterans who are talking badly about that, right? Like, I think I will not have one word of criticism about J.D. Vance and his service or his deployment or any of the things that he did. I'm glad that he served. I appreciate that. I think that's wonderful, right? And then what we're not talking about is Donald Trump, who got 5 deferments, including by paying doctors to say he had bone spurs in order to not go to Vietnam. So like that, how is his campaign pushing an argument against the guy who did serve in the military for 24 years, a guy who avoided it by pretending to have bone spurs? That's a crazy thing to do. I think it's a bad argument for them to like. I don't like this tack. Maybe people will like it. Maybe it'll resonate, but it's dishonest. It's not fair, and it totally ignores the obvious flaws that exist in your own candidate.
Who's next?
So here are the facts, right? To get promoted from Master Sergeant to Sergeant Major, in order to be able to retain it, you have to have served in the rank for a certain amount of time. You have to go to the Sergeant Major Academy, complete it, and then after that, you have to serve in the rank for another 2 years. He didn't meet all 3 of those. He didn't finish the Command Sergeant Major Academy, and then he didn't do the 2 years afterwards. So when he did separate, he was reduced from Command Sergeant Major to Master Sergeant. The problem is that he's saying that he retired as a Command Sergeant Major when it's factually incorrect. And that's the bone that people are picking with.
But he can just blame it on an assistant and be like, oh, an intern put it up there, until someone calls him out for it. He just like might just.
Well, I think if there's blame to be had, let's remember that, right? We're using specific words here, and did he retire as a Command Sergeant Major? In retirement, he's not a Command Sergeant Major. He did retire while he was holding the rank of Command Sergeant Major. He was acting in that role. So I feel like we're talking a little, when you have to get this technical, when we're jumping in over each other to talk about something so technical in nature, we're probably like getting wrapped around the axle on something that is not important.
I mean, everyone lies on their resume. Come on. All right, Jesse.
24 years in the reserve, right? I feel like we're getting wrapped around the axle on something that is like not important.
Got it. Jesse, sorry for interrupting you.
But the challenge coin he was giving out, that after he had retired and was in Congress or whatever he was doing after his military service, had the Sergeant Major rank on it.
He identifies as a Command Sergeant Major, guys. Come on.
Right. So it wasn't a clerical error where he was like, oh yeah, I didn't think about that. As part of the agreement for going to Sergeant Major Academy, all these things, you sign up and you fully understand what you're agreeing to. And his NGB 22 and NGB 22A, which are the discharge forms you get in the Guard, if it's similar to a DD 214. You can have a DD 214 and DD 215, which is the correction for your military service. So that's what the NGB 22A is, and that shows the reduction from E9 to E8. And that is based on the clerical error or clerical records, right? So it wasn't that he did something and got reduced. It's just that he was promoted. He was able to serve in that role honorably. And then and then because he wasn't able to finish Sergeant Major Academy for who knows what reason. Again, I go with Chuck here, right? It was 24 years of service. He did a great job. It's just he didn't finish it. There were a lot of things going on. 9/11 just happened, all these other things. So he's trying to prepare a battalion to deploy. I have heard, I didn't verify it, but looking at some of the things, he did tell his battalion that he was going to be the Sergeant Major for the deployment. What I don't know, and it's kind of unclear, is how he separated prior to the deployment. I don't know the background or the facts regarding that, but that portion of history is another axe that people are trying to grind, and for a political reason. But I don't know the facts surrounding why he didn't deploy with those guys. Could have been a million things, but I think it had to do with him running for political office in that same year.
Yeah, he's anti-war. He didn't want to go to Iraq. He was done. He did his 24, whatever. So, I mean, they don't really have anything on him. Mason, what do you think?
But I guess the flip side of it would be if he'd actually taken the deployment, been that Sergeant Major, or that whole deployment, like how badass of a story would that be right now? As opposed to every time he speaks about like raising a weapon, people are going to call him out. And then JD Vance.
Well, let's finish on Tim Walz. I will say just one last thing on Tim Walz for me is that I don't want my Command Sergeant Major being some hippie motherfucker, all right? So go retire, Tim, run for Congress, go fuck your wife. I don't give a fuck what you do. Don't come to Iraq with me. Just give me anybody else, honestly. But that's just me.
Well said. I agree. But it's like literally J.D. Vance was there at the exact same time, right? 2005. So it's like polar opposites as far as qualifications for office, in my opinion. because J.D. Vance went where Walz chose not to.
Yeah, I've got to say something about that. I think that's crazy. Again, like, I'm not here to criticize anybody's military record. I don't think we should be. I appreciate J.D. Vance for serving. I think he did the right thing. But serving 6 months as a combat reporter who, in his own terms, never saw any kind of combat, right? Like, I'm not sure that we can say, oh, he did the right thing. He's the brave patriot. And this guy who served 24 years in the reserves, ready to go from the time that I was born until practically the time that I entered the military. This guy was in the military, joined at 17 years old. Like, the idea that he is somehow the unpatriotic, like, pretender who's stealing valor, as opposed to the guy who served for 4 years and went to Iraq for 6 months, never saw combat, is not that he is like the heroic patriot. I don't buy that. I just don't buy it. It doesn't make sense to me. And I don't think other people will buy it either. So it's fine. Like, that's the position that anybody's welcome to take that. I don't think it makes sense.
What did his unit do during Desert Storm? Did they not get called up?
I don't think he went.
Yeah, I don't know about.
Because they called up everybody for Desert Storm, I thought.
He did Italy. He did like a non-combat deployment to Italy, I saw.
That was I think that was prior to the invasion of Iraq. Yeah.
Okay, so J.D. Vance. Before that, let's compare these two guys. Two very, very different people. Two very, very different stages of their lives. One was a very long military career. One was very short. But commonalities between these two guys, what I see is that they're basically both Midwestern guys from different generations that joined the military when they were very young, and it helped them get a leg up in life. And go to college, and then they snowballed from there, and they built up a middle-class life, and then eventually they both became politicians. And I'm glad. I mean, like, even if J.D. Vance only was like a reporter, basically, and I think he basically never went outside the wire, and he did mention rockets, but, like, everybody had the rockets. So it's like, I mean,
8 rockets for breakfast.
Yeah, I'm glad that young people are out there, especially that come from economically depressed backgrounds, have a chance to get that leg up. So that's good.
Yeah, I just wasn't prepared to talk about J.D. Vance. I was reminiscing about all the rocket and mortar attacks that occurred on a daily.
Jesse's in a flashback right now. All right, Jesse, let me set you up here. What do you think about J.D. Vance's pathetic crowd sizes? And do you think he's the worst VP pick in history?
I hadn't seen pathetic crowd sizes, but I've also haven't paid attention to the election race, constantly watching rallies and things like that. I haven't been doing that in the last couple weeks. I've been a little busy doing other things, but I have not seen pathetic crowd sizes for J.D. Vance. I have seen some articles about photoshopping crowd sizes for some other candidates, though.
Yeah, I mean, it's propaganda. Chuck, I personally would not walk across the street to go see J.D. Vance talk, so I think this pathetic crowd size thing is probably apt. I don't think he can draw a crowd. He's not really serious, or super inspiring. I think maybe some people, but he doesn't have that inspirational charisma, right? I'm putting words in your mouth, but you probably agree, right?
No, I guess I generally agree. I think it's interesting we're talking about the VP candidates so heavily because they don't generally make that big a difference in the overall outcome of the race. I do think it is a little ironic that probably the weaker of the two, the one that does seem to be struggling to get support from the base of the party, is J.D. Vance, and he's the one who's running with the 80-year-old guy at this point. So he's the one who has probably the better chance of landing in the primary role at some point during this. But that's still unlikely. Trump will probably serve out his entire term if he wins. And so, all this talk about the VP candidates is not, I don't know that it's that important. But I do think J.D. Vance hasn't seemed to resonate, right? I haven't heard real excitement among Republicans with him, and he's definitely turning off Democrats and independents. And that's probably going to be an issue for them. And in terms of crowd size, I'm sure he probably has had some rallies that have had a lot of people, but there was very clearly a rally where it appeared that there were more staff and press than there were participants. The camera pans back, and there's there were 2 or 3 people chatting who aren't standing there in suits or with cameras. And so that's problematic. It just speaks to whether people are excited or not. And it's not a great place to be in, right? You've got Harris and Walz touring the country, and say what you will about crowd size, right? Like definitely drawing good sized crowds, generating a lot of excitement. And you've got JD Vance coming out and speaking to like a handful of people here and there. Trump is in Mar-a-Lago. He holds, a single press conference in his house and flies to, like a super red state to do, a rally that's more of a fundraiser and actually probably a little bit more particular senator that he's not fond of. So I don't know. It doesn't seem like it was a good week for the Trump campaign. It doesn't seem like JD Vance is adding a lot to the ticket, which is a problem, right? I think Walz is adding a lot to the Democratic ticket, and Vance, hopefully he's not detracting, but he's certainly not adding a lot to the ticket for the Republicans.
Nice. I think that Tim Walz is a way better pick than JD Vance. What do you think?
I disagree. I just think Walz looks like a goofball that, on the note of like not respecting someone, Walz, so far I haven't seen him do anything that makes me think like that seems presidential. JD Vance, like as far as like he hasn't been a home run, but I think that's kind of the goal. As Jesse mentioned, the vice president nominee doesn't usually impact the election too much. So it's like the absence of outcry should kind of be the victory, right? Like Mike Pence, everybody was like, oh my God, he's a bigot. Everybody's pretty upset about that. You haven't heard that for JD Vance. So I think that's a victory. So it's kind of like the absence of a defeat in that case, or the absence of outcry could be the victory. But the real thing, all it really takes is JD Vance needs to hit the gym and get back to where he could pass a Marine Corps deployment physical. And then I think he'd be more inspiring. But right now that doughboy could not pass a physical.
Yeah, man, he gives off lawyer vibes. They had the Air Force Two incident where their planes were near each other at this airport. And so JD Vance did this, like, I'm going to very confidently walk up to Air Force Two and like try to get on the plane and then like do some confident joking about how it's going to be his plane soon and stuff. It's like,
Senator, did you see the vice president?
Hey guys, how are you?
Good.
I just wanted to check out my future plane, but I also wanted to go say hello to the vice president and ask her why Kamala Harris refuses. Why does she refuse to answer questions from the media? And I also thought that the press gaggle following her might get a little lonely. I at least have enough respect for you all and for the American people you report to come and talk to you.
It reminded me almost of like sports team, like trash talk, or like, oh, we're going to show those Knickerbockers next week. It's just like cheesy as fuck, right? I mean, like, shouldn't you be focused on like doing politics?
He was politicking because after that he walked up to reporters and was like, hey, where's Vice President? She's not over here talking to you. I'll talk to you because, politics.
Yeah, but he went up to the plane and was like, it's my plane or something.
It was politics. It was a stunt. It was what it was. Did it read well? I'm not sure if it did. I do think the best part of it was, the part that read the best and got the best headlines was him talking, as you could imagine, right? Talking to the reporters and asking them why Kamala Harris is not talking to them. But he's saying that at the same time as like Donald Trump is entirely absent from the campaign. Like I feel like sometimes they're just on different teams. They're both talking up like on opposite sides. Donald Trump is sitting in Mar-a-Lago, not talking to anybody for several days there and thereafter. And he's asking where Harris is, and he's talking about Walz service while Donald Trump is getting deferments. Like sometimes I just feel like they're on opposite pages, or at least you've got Vance, bringing forward issues that maybe the campaign should be moving away from based on the candidate, right? And I would say around Vance, Trump has several times now had to like defend his position, his pick of that candidate, and that's like not the place that you want to be in as the candidate, right? To have to defend your VP pick as making sense at all, as not dragging you down. I think there are some criticisms of Walz, but I don't think anybody's telling Kamala Harris that she made the wrong pick. This is catastrophic. And there's been a bunch of headlines, including Republicans, saying that like Vance is a catastrophic pick. I'm not going to say he's a catastrophic pick.
He sucks.
You don't want to have to defend against that as the candidate, right?
It's pretty terrible.
All right, so our last topic is the U.S. military pulled out of Niger. There's probably still CIA there, so I don't know what exactly, but they probably have some secret stuff. But they had this kind of like semi-overt drone base, like this big drone base you could see in the middle of Niger and Agadez that they were doing ISR, and they probably dropping missiles on people and shit. about 1,000, 1,100 military or contractors. I don't know the exact numbers, but it's like small, medium-sized base in Africa there. Basically, 1 year ago, I wasn't really following this, but I remember seeing it, but I didn't get too much into it. 1 year ago, the military in Niger, arrested the president or whatever and took over. They say they're going to transition to civilian rule in 3 years. They're basically throwing us out, bringing the Russians in. So the Russians are going to be using our bases that we built. It's like $100 million base that we're just leaving there. We left them a bunch of trucks and stuff like that too. That's not a big deal. Once the French left, and they destroyed their whole base and everything, but the French left earlier. The deadline for us was coming up. The big problem for Niger after this coup apparently is that they were getting about 40% of their budget from the EU, I guess as charity or something, or foreign aid or whatever you want to call it. And that's all gone because now they've joined this anti-Western, pro-Russian alliance between Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso, where they don't want to have anything to do with us and they like the Russians now. People are saying it's a big problem.
We shouldn't be in Niger for any reason. We have no authority to operate there. We should withdraw. We shouldn't have built that $100 million runway. And instead, we should have spent that money should never have been taken from taxpayers. Period. I'm out.
Chuck?
That's very consistent with what you said earlier. I think, I don't know, I'm not against the idea of U.S. projecting our strength. I don't know that I love us being in Niger, but it is a region that we do have to worry about. It is a region where we're starting to see burgeoning Islamic terrorism potentially. I don't know. It's in the middle of a bunch of destability, and I worry about that. But am I really sad that we're not there? No. Am I sad that we wasted a bunch of money there? Yes. I don't know. I think it's a little complicated. I can frequently see the argument for the U.S. participating in things overseas. For all intents and purposes, we have asked to be, the party globally that has the most power and most influence, and as a consequence, maybe has the most responsibility to maintain stability in certain areas. And I do think for our own, lack of a better word, hegemony, there are reasons why we should project ourselves in a variety of places and interject. Not true in all cases, but I certainly see the argument for doing that, especially when it is relatively low cost, and particularly when there's no human cost on the U.S.'s side to those actions. I don't think it's great that we're leaving, but I also don't feel strongly about us needing to be there. And I think, again, these costs for the U.S. taxpayer are relatively insignificant. So there's an argument to be made about overall cost, but the costs themselves are not considerably high. Look at prices of other programs.
Jesse, what do you think?
One of the ways that we measure ourselves is access, basing, and overflight. And it's for those strategic long-term unknowns, right? So we want to be in the area in case something happens, and that way we have somewhere to go, a way to get there. I could only imagine that's probably one of those reasons why we were in Niger. It's a region of instability, and so finding a location where we can have something in the event that it just boils over, it'd be nice to have a place to go to, so that way if we are asked to come be the world's police, we can do that.
Well, the people are saying that it's flashing red lights, coastal Africa, west coast of Africa. I think it's a huge problem. I think that the next 9/11, if you want to kind of characterize something that's coming here to hit us, is going to come from this place. I mean, I don't think that Afghanistan is really the place where that's going to happen. I mean, the Taliban is in control. They don't want us coming back. They're not going to let some, crazy shit probably come over here. I think this place is out of control. I think the Russians are going to let them go buck wild out there. These African bad guys are assholes, and we should be killing them at every turn. Just mowing the grass as often as possible, and just prevent it, and just until something changes. But if we just pull out and the French pull out and the Russians move in, and then it's going to be like a Disneyland for these assholes. They're all going to come there. They're all going to be doing their thing, coming up with their plans. It doesn't cost a lot of money to terrorist attack us. All they have to do is get on a plane or a boat or something, make it to Central America. They go sleep on top of one of those trains. It'll drive them right up to the border. They'll walk right up to the border. The Border Patrol will be like, "Oh, welcome to America." And then they'll just let them out, and they'll be like, "We're going to need you to come to court in 6 months." And then they're going to go somewhere and then do their terrorist attack. That's plain to see. I mean,
do their terrorism.
Yeah, I mean, they can do anything.
I don't know if that's plain to see. I do think, yes, I think you're on to a line of logic. I don't think that's plain to see that that's necessarily the course of events.
What's stopping them, Chuck? What's stopping it?
Well, so I don't think that they can generally just walk up to the border and walk into the United States. I understand that that is going to be a point of contention probably in this discussion, but I don't think in general any person in the world can just walk up to the U.S. border and walk into the United States. And I understand that we disagree on that fact.
Are we living in the same
But I
world?
don't think it's so straightforward. I don't think it's that straightforward. Yes. Could a terrorist, if they wanted to get into the United States, probably cross the border? Yes.
A dozen terrorists?
In a variety of ways.
50?
They could probably also do it in a variety of ways, right? Like lots of people enter the United States every day, and they do it in a variety of ways. Yeah, I hear your point. I think you are making a point that has some merit, but the idea that like this is necessarily going to occur across our southern border is, I do not think, the strongest portion of your argument.
I think it's a huge threat. What do you guys think about the possibility of terrorism coming out of West Africa? Chuck just mentioned it, but Jesse and Mason, are you worried about it?
Yes. I mean, you think about this bomb that just went off. The Israelis built it over months, right, to loop back to Iran. You think about the Ho Chi Minh Trail, the supply route the Vietnamese used that was like 1,000 miles long, and they carried 2 mortars down one at a time. Yeah, I think it's possible that someone could slowly smuggle some really bad shit. That's why we need good border control.
They don't even need to smuggle anything. They can just buy weapons when they get here and then just shoot up a concert or whatever, or a football game, a Tennessee Titans game. They can do anything they fucking want. There's nothing stopping it.
I don't know if we necessarily need to worry any more than we would about any other country that has the ability to slowly move things little by little. I don't know if we need to necessarily pay special attention any more than we already would be.
Alrighty, hopefully I'm just crazy. That's the last topic, so I'll leave you guys a chance to say goodbye, say any final things you would like. Let's start with Jesse.
Thanks again for having me. Chuck, it was nice to see you again, as well as Mason and John. We'll see you next time.
Nice to see everybody again. This was a good discussion. I think these frequently go in unexpected directions, and sometimes I find myself on the conservative side of the argument, or the side that we might think of as conservative, which is an interesting place to be, because I certainly don't see myself that way. But yeah, good to talk to everybody, and this was great. Thanks.
Better liberal it up some more. You're out of here. Mason, you want to finish up?
Sure. Thanks for having me again, as always. JD Vance needs to get in shape.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks everybody for watching. Good show. Next week, we've got Chris, who I served with, and Matt Tipton, and hopefully Nikki, who is new and liberal, and she will give Chuck the week off. Hopefully she likes this episode. All right. I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.